You ultimately left the show prematurely.
No, I got fired. I got fired.
When they fired you, it really caught you by surprise.
Put a lump in my throat.
You know, they've called me racist on the left for a long time.
That was me, a disruptive factor.
She had to fire me because there was nothing else to do.
It's a little different when you replace Becky or the mom off of Fresh Prince.
Right.
They're not going to get rid of Chrissy. Never think that you are not replaceable. Rule number 1.
Do you have a greatest casting heartbreak that happened in your career?
There's so many. Well, I was in Fight Club until I just wasn't. That's
Really?
just one. Yeah. I met with David Fincher, who just handed me a script. I was on my way to going to the airport. He said, "If you like it, the part is yours." I read it, called him, and said, I would like to do it. And then some time went by, and my agent called very upset, had read that Helena, in the Hollywood Reporter, whatever, they had the casting, and then I called David Fincher. I said, "Are you allowed to do that?" And he said, "Apparently."
You were on Lord of the Rings, and then you weren't on Lord of the Rings. And if you find, lots of people have jobs, and then they don't have jobs. But yours just happened to be public.
Yeah.
What's that like when you walk down the street and you know they know too?
It's good for the ego. It's a good ego destroyer. You know, this business is, you eat humble pie a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. You have to be fairly thick-skinned to want to get into this business.
Got fired from my first pilot.
And you got to take the good with the bad.
I got replaced on this pilot on the WB called Off Center.
And you got to you got to get used to being rejected.
Someone at the network didn't like my face or something.
And not take it personally, which can be hard.
I think it was a good thing.
Is it one of those blessings in disguise?
100%.
Yeah.
I think getting fired is important. I got something, and it was Thunder Alley with Ed Asner, and I auditioned, I got it, and it was a sitcom, and we shot the pilot in front of an audience, as one does. I flew back to New York. I thought, yeah, I have a pilot. My agent called me and said, "Hey, are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "They're reshooting the pilot." And I went, "Do I have to go back to LA?" And he went, "No."
I was the original dad on Full House. And that wasn't what I really came out to do. That wasn't the kind of comedy I was doing, but it was something that was offered to me. I was 30, I was young, it was exciting, and big hit on ABC, and everything was great. And I went back to Atlanta to pull my stuff out in a trailer, and halfway across the country got a phone call that I was no longer in the show.
I was fired from Antz, that animated movie. Apparently, I was a bad aunt. And then they brought in Sharon Stone, so I was like, oh, you really did go a different, like she's, down here. She's like old movie star vixen.
Got a call from Los Angeles, and it was the author's show, Maud. And we started rehearsing, but before we did, I came in, and Bea and I were old friends, and we were wearing outfits done by the same woman in New York called Bibi. And she said, "I got it in brown." I said, "I got it in purple." She said, "I got it in black." I said, "I got it in blue." We did our little routine together. And then we rehearsed a little bit, and then they said, "Okay, that's all we need to do today." And the phone rang, and it was Rob Parker, and he said, "Honey, we made a mistake." Of course, the blood just drained from me. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're like a little B author. Because of that routine we did, I never would have played it that way anyway." And so I was fired. And Rue McClanahan got the part.
2 Oscars by 30, and such an incredible achievement. And then I was remembering that just before all that happened for you, you had been on Beverly Hills 90210.
Did you watch that? Did you watch me on that show? Let me just say I was on 90210 in the 8th season when no one watched it anymore, and Luke Perry was long gone.
Right.
So I was fired off the show at that point.
Now,
and I was devastated because I thought...
You must have been horrified because the show was...
Devastated.
Yeah.
I'm thinking no one watches the show anymore, and I got fired off of the show that no one watches. How was
right.
Yeah.
And so you went right from that, and I think it was soon afterwards you did Boys Don't Cry, right?
Yes, I had signed on to a 2-year contract with 90210. I got fired 13 episodes in of the first year, and 2 months later, after I got fired, I got Boys Don't Cry.
That is sweet. I mean, revenge usually doesn't come that quickly in this
I
job.
looked at it as like a silver lining, like it's always such a reminder when something bad happens that there's something else that could be looming around the corner, but revenge can work too.
We hired Frances Fisher as the female lead, and we did the table reading, and Frances Fisher was like really, she was good, and the show was funny, and people were laughing, and we knew we had a good show. It's just, she's a wonderful actress, but she's not really as funny as he is. And he said, "I'll give one more try." And he went back to his office, and he had tried Pat Richardson before. She just had given birth to twins or something, and he decided to try one more time. And he called her manager, and she finally talked her into coming in, and she came in the next day.
You started to make Queen Christina, the rumor has it, with Greta Garbo, and yet we all know that the finished film did not have you in it. Is there anything embarrassing connected with that?
Not now. It was at the time very embarrassing. But
what happened?
What happened was that I started working with Garbo, and I just didn't measure up. I wasn't good enough for her. I was, 25 years old? That's no excuse. I mean, one could be quite good at 25. But she was an absolute master of her trade. And she was a great figure. She had an enormous image to the public, and me, I was just groveling like a puppy dog in front of her. I wasn't the way to play her great lover. And it became apparent. It was apparent to me, really. I wasn't really surprised when I was fired.
And then when Iron Man, the whole controversy around Iron Man, I know they paid you a lot in that first Iron Man, and about $6 million, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was like 4.5.
4.5, and they didn't want to pay you what you wanted the second time around.
No, the second time they came and they said, we think the movie would be successful with or without you. So instead of the $8 million that we've said we're going to pay you, we're going to let you come back for $1 million. We did a 3-picture deal already, so it wasn't any negotiating. Yeah. It was a 3-picture deal, so I'm like, oh, we're good. I forgot. I didn't know that it was not a mutually binding contract. It was only beneficial for them. Yeah. They could bring me back or not. They can honor it or not. And they made a great deal. Don and Robert, they get along well. They got along well. But the best thing that happened as a result of it, I went and I finished. Went back to school, got my doctorate in chemical engineering. It had nothing to do with Don. It had to do with them needing to take the $7 million from me and give it to somebody else. Don just happened to be somebody that. Because really, initially, they wanted Don in that role. And my agent pushed me into the role. So I never had beef with Don about any of that stuff. I still hear a lot of fans asking, am I going to come back and be War Machine? And I think they could have a huge franchise off of it, but
Clayne Crawford got fired from the hit TV show Lethal Weapon, and he's been replaced by Sean William Scott.
My mom actually showed me the picture.
Sean William Scott.
And she said, she goes, they actually did it,
It's got to be rough to fire somebody who is that deep into a show where you're one of the two main characters. Now, is the new actor coming in going to play the same character? Yeah. Oh, he's playing the same character. Oh, jeez.
Because when word came that he's being fired, they thought, okay, maybe he's going to be killed off in the finale, and so then a new character will be introduced.
He was just recast.
Yeah, he's just being recast.
That doesn't happen that often anymore. It was revealed that star Clayne Crawford, who played Riggs on the show, was fired at the end of season 2 because he was extremely difficult to work with.
You can watch the episode. It's episode 5 of season 2.
I think I should do it. What's that? I don't know! Shut the up! Newman, they're right here. Get somebody in here with a walkie and shut them the up!
This poor kid is sitting there with a gun to his head, and he's crying, and he's shaking, and he's done it 100 times, and the boom operator who's standing behind him, hanging the microphone over us, she's just looking at me and shaking her head because there's so much racket.
Right.
I snapped. Should I have walked to my trailer? 100%. Should I have just gone and sat and waited? Because that's what I was instructed to do when there was a problem. You go sit in your trailer and you lock your door and you take a nap. I'm from Alabama, where I come from a very blue-collar background, so we just work hard and you get the job done. Now, again, Hollywood is very sensitive, so I should not have screamed and yelled, right? Because there's a bunch of very delicate flowers out there. Now, mind you, when the incident happened, I had to pay half of my salary for that episode. I had to spend 6 weeks in anger management every day on my lunch break. And I had to be escorted to and from set, from my trailer to set, by a security guard. So it was humiliating. Did I make a poor choice? Absolutely, right? I shouldn't have lost, and I felt embarrassed in the moment because I was belligerent. I was so angry, right? I knew that they had those tapes, and they had been blackmailing me with that. And when I say blackmail, anytime I had a problem with D, whether it be he would show up to work and say...
Damon Wayans.
Right. And Damon would say, you know, what are we doing at this church? I was like, what do you mean we're doing at this church? Like, we're shooting here all day. And he's like... And he would take his material and go, I can't shoot inside of a church. It's against my religion. I started dying laughing because I thought it was funny.
Right.
And he's like, dude, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not allowed to go into another house of worship. And it's like, well, then you can read the script beforehand, because see, he wouldn't do table reads. So there was no way for us to get an indication of what worked and what didn't work and what he would do and what he wouldn't do. So we would have to find out on the day. Once they had that tape, anytime I complained, it's like, this will come out and it will ruin your career. And I personally thought, oh, well, I have a pretty good idea where the source of this information is coming from, and it'll surely just blow over at someone just being a little bit of a jerk. And it came out perfectly on the day that I directed my first episode of national television. I can't imagine them making a TV show without me. That'd be kind of like when they killed Optimus Prime in the cartoon movie in the 80s. Remember when we went to go... And again, I knew we had problems.
You know, I've seen handle hits better than you did yesterday, right?
Suck.
I mean, that was the biggest move I think I've ever seen. You're the biggest crybaby I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, come on, suck this.
We saw the show differently. I think I came from it creatively. You know, I just finished Rectify, so I was quite hesitant to come into a network show, much less the remake of what I thought was a great film.
Which one of you was on board first, then?
Me.
You were on board first.
I'm the bigger whore.
You're the and did you have to approve, Clayton? Did they kind of say, who do you want as your rigs?
Yes, I signed off. I signed off on Clayton. No, they wanted. It was all about chemistry, and I had read with a couple of actors, and they were trying to do impressions of Mel Gibson. And then they was like, you got to meet this one other guy, because I was a little frustrated and a little nervous that I had signed on to this. And then I met Clayton, and he seemed very kind of down to earth, and I didn't believe that he had it in him to try to do Mel Gibson.
To make it your own. I mean,
Yeah,
it's quite hard to make these roles your own. You mentioned chemistry. The chemistry is all in this partnership, isn't it?
Mm.
So what did you think when you met this man? Like, you know that this has got to work.
Tell him.
Well, listen, you know, I'm not a fan of actors in general.
You don't like actors?
I don't like actors, no.
Why not?
Because they're
self-indulgent.
That's one.
Egotistical.
There you go. Again, our work ethics were quite different, and creatively we saw the show much differently, but I just didn't think they were going to get rid of me, I guess. And if they did, I thought they would give me a buzz and just say, hey.
A jangle.
Just a jangle, you know,
Yeah.
just grab 2 cans and a string and just be like, you're not coming back. We feel like this is the Damon Wayans show, and people just don't like you. So then, of course, I go and check social media, because that's how I found out my fate. I was like, this is obviously Damon putting this shit out there. He said, Clayton, I can't promise you that I can save your job. But what I can tell you is that you have to make a public announcement apologizing publicly to Damon Wayans. I was like, Peter, why would I apologize publicly because he and I had a riff on set? And he's like, Clayton, that statement alone tells me that you don't want to come back. And I was just like, I can't apologize to this guy. Like, he has made life miserable for me on this show. And I was like, and I also feel like that they're already moving forward. I feel like if I apologize, they're going to use that to justify this poor decision that they're making in supporting his bad behavior.
It was year 6 and my contract is now up. I want you to pay me what you're paying the men. I have the highest demographics of all women in television, 18 to 49. You can see I smartened up by this point. You know, I'm now 6 years into success, and and made good money, and you just learn stuff about the business. And I say to John and Joyce at the end of the season before, my contract's up. You two have already renegotiated because you were here before. Mine's up right before the start of the season. I'm going to ask for big money and a piece of the back end, and if you two back me up because we have favored nations, we'll all get it. So I'll be the patsy. So my husband went in, and the lawyer for ABC was George Sunderland, and my lawyer was Gunther Schiff. And Alan Hamill and Gunther Schiff walk in, and Mickey Ross is sitting in a chair. Doesn't get up when Alan walks in. ABC lawyer Sunderland looks at my lawyer and says, "You got me last time, but you're not going to get me this time," because they had negotiated the Cindy Williams, Penny Marshall deal. And ABC was paying more for Penny and Cindy than they wanted to. So they sit down, and my husband says, as you know, Suzanne's been on the show for 6 years now, and she has the highest demographics of all women in television in the desired ages of 18 to 49, and she's been on hundreds of magazine covers, and she brought so much publicity to the show. So she would like to be paid, which the men are averaging on television, which is $150,000 a week, and a piece of the back end. And Mickey Ross is in the chair, and he's smoking. And when Alan finishes, he throws his cigarettes out, stomps it out with his feet, leans over to my husband. He said, "You want me to share my blood with her?" And my husband stood up nose to nose and said, "Yes." And at that moment, my career was over.
The differences we had on that show, and we had a number of differences, as evidenced by my early departure from the show, was I felt that with two other younger children, one of whom who aspired to become a Supreme Court justice, that would be Ralph Carter or Michael, and the other, Bernadette Stannis, I think, she aspired to become a surgeon. And the differences I had with the producers of the show was that I felt too much emphasis was being put on JJ and his chicken hat and saying dynamite every third page, when just as much emphasis and mileage could have been gotten out of my other two children and the concomitant jokes and humor that could have come out of that. But I wasn't the most diplomatic guy, like I said, in those days, and they got tired of having their lives threatened over jokes. So they said, "To tell you what, why don't we kill him off and we'll all get on with our lives. Life's too short." So that taught me a lesson that I wasn't as important as I thought I was to the show.
Originally, I met Kirk Cameron when I was in Pennsylvania, and I was doing a car show. And this was in 1986. Growing Pains was a fairly new television series, and Alan Thicke and Kirk Cameron were at that same car show signing autographs. And there was a group of about a dozen playmates at that same car show signing autographs. And he asked me to, if I would come and watch a show sometime for their TV show, Growing Pains. And I was like, sure. And so I was giving him my phone number. A couple of years later, Kirk had called me and invited me to shows, but I never could make it because I was usually working when they were filming the shows. So a couple of years later, I come in and I'm auditioning, and there he is, and he recognizes me, and he was all happy to see me. I was happy to see him, and the producers, we did this scene, and it was great. We had great chemistry. The producers were happy that we knew each other. They asked why. We told them, and so the producers, they knew that I was a playmate because of that conversation. And next thing you know, I got brought in for another role, which was the nanny. And first couple episodes that I did were fantastic. And then we went to Christmas holiday break, and in the meantime, they wrote me in all these new episodes to be his girlfriend and everything else. But then Kirk became a born-again Christian over the holiday, and everything changed. And then he stopped talking to me. He stopped talking to the rest of the cast. Thought we were all sinners. Thought we were all going to hell, and just really completely blockaded us. So that was that. And then he said that he wouldn't re-sign the last two seasons. They held up the contracts for the last two seasons of the show, and the producers weren't sure if he was going to re-sign or not. And he only re-signed if they would write me off of the show. And he held up those contracts until they wrote me off the show and showed, his mom the script. And that's how I got written off the show. It was a power play.
my whole time on Living Single, I was happy I had a job, but I understood the importance of the job I had. They wanted us to be Lenny and Squiggy. And at one point, I forgot what we were doing, but we both just looked at each other and said, we can't do this like this. In the beginning, we were just following orders. You know, we doing what they tell us to do. But then we started looking at it and we were like, we had a lot of, and I won't say a lot, but there were times when we had issues on the show. And we would come to them as a cast. But I would be the spokesperson for it. And so that last season before I left, they called me in. And they basically said, well, you know, all these problems that, you know, we've been having, they listen to you. And I kind of looked at them, I said, well, first of all, we're dealing with 5 grown people, and they have their own mindset and their own ideas about what we're doing. And everything we come to you with is a group decision, not my decision. But if you think I have that much power, then I need to have a different job. And I don't think they like that. So that season I was at home watching the final, and I asked them, because they sent me off in the episode, they were sending me off to London. And I said, so you getting ready to fire me? I just need to know so I can line up my stuff and so I can be prepared. They're like, no, we never break up the group. No, we wouldn't do that. Watching the episode goes off. Not 2 minutes later, my phone rings. And it's my lawyer telling me that they're not gonna bring me back next year. It wasn't that I got fired, it was the way it was done. One thing I do, I will never regret is speaking my mind about how I felt about what they were asking us to do.
I remember, Nicole, you were very vocal about being vilified after Desperate Housewives.
For me, when I spoke out of being the victim of assault and battery, I was absolutely vilified.
I think the thing is, though, you know, Nicolette seemed ready to leave. She seemed like it was something she wanted. And so, you know, she was happy, and you have to wish your friends well. I mean, I think that character will be missed on the show. I don't think that character is replaceable. But I do believe that there are some kind of arenas, like a neighborhood, where, as great as they are, people can come and go, and there can be something new and exciting that you didn't expect.
I think everyone was a seasoned professional. I think everyone was really grateful for the job. I think everyone's very different. You know, it wasn't like they were casting a family where you kind of go, oh, they want the same sensibility, we want the same feeling from each person. They were casting very, no pun intended, very disparate characters for these desperate housewives. So I think you had 4 very different women, and 5, really, Nicolette Sheridan. So I think everyone was very different, and there was a lot of pressure on the show. So there were some very tense times, and there were some real fun times.
Shannon was a handful, but I always feel like she brought so much of that fiery spirit to her character, which was so great for the show.
I was already in way too much trouble on that show.
And yeah, they were like, they were burning the candle at both ends, and they were living like rock stars. It was mutual. Everybody, I think, you know, it got to the point where the cast was just sort of like, had enough of Shannon, and Shannon probably had enough of the whole. I think she needed to, like, you know, be free from all this for a while.
You didn't want to lose Shelley, but it was time to. It was not all pleasant what was going on there. She was tough to work with, and yeah, and then they were pushing, and she wasn't sure she wanted to stay, and it just got all of them to thinking about what if we had somebody else.
I knew that I had a 5-year contract, and as did everyone else, and so the discussion of what was going to happen following that 5-year contract had come up around the 4th year, I think. And Ted, I believe it was the 4th year, or prior to the 4th year, that he extended his 5-year contract to 6. So that discussion was ongoing, and I pretty much indicated that I was ready to devote more time to my family, and I already had my contract with Disney by that point. So although I hadn't given them a final decision, I'd indicated where I was going, so they wouldn't be left without some sense of where they were going.
When you first left The Fresh Prince,
What happened? That's what we all really want to know. What is your side?
I know, because you know what? You guys have been discussed. It's been discussed for 25 years. It's insane. Janet Hubert was never difficult on that set. Janet Hubert was so professional, it wasn't even funny. I think Will simply needed to win, and I think sometimes when you get caught up in a lie, and those things never happened. She never left the set, I never left the set. We got along great. I think he was young, and he was inexperienced, and I think he simply had to win.
I was 21 years old.
Yeah,
You know?
I know. I know.
Everything was a threat to me.
Why was I a threat?
Not you, the world. I was so driven by fear and jokes and comedy and all of that.
Yeah, you were live. You were live. You were live.
You know.
But what you didn't realize either, that I was going through a lot at home.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You didn't know. You
Yep.
guys didn't know. Very abusive marriage.
I can see now the level of pain and the level of struggle that it was for you just to show up every day. And then,
But you took all that away from me. With your words. You know, words can kill. But I lost everything. Reputation, everything, everything. And I understand you were able to move forward, but you know those words, calling a black woman difficult in Hollywood is the kiss of death. It's the kiss of death, and it's hard enough being a dark-skinned black woman in this business. But I felt it was necessary for us to finally move forward.
yeah.
And I'm sorry that I have blasted you to pieces.
The day he got fired, my publicist said, "Well, do you want to put out a public statement because you guys were so close?" And I was, in the midst of writing the public statement. It's been an honor to work with Charlie all these years, and when my publicist said, "Oh wait, it's just come over the wire. He's called you a traitor, a turncoat, and a troll." And I was like, okay, let's put a pin in that statement of support.
You're on this hit sitcom. You're making $2 million an episode. Wow.
Hello.
At the height of your career, what happened?
I think I just started partying too hard. I started having way too much fun.
Seriously?
And it spilled over onto the set a little bit. I mean, I wasn't partying on the set. I was never high when I worked, but no, that became secondary. And what became the thrust of what I was, curious to pursue was like traveling on my weeks off and inviting all my buddies, and I'm eating steak. Everybody's eating steak, and just jewelry and excess, and there was this little show I had to keep going back to keep getting the money. But
So the show was kind of getting in the way of
getting in
your
the way
life?
of my social life. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I take things too far. It's who I am. I mean, what am I going to sit here and lie to you?
The show
Terrible liar. I'm a
claimed
terrible liar.
that you were unable to perform your duties. They cited erratic behavior
Lies.
and derogatory public comments about
Lies.
the show. You
Lies.
claim it was wrongful termination. Is the truth somewhere in the middle there, Charlie?
The derogatory stuff is true.
Yeah.
But that other stuff is not.
Not erratic.
I will
You
give
didn't
them that.
behave erratically on the set or anything
never.
like that?
No. I was too busy delivering their show. Too busy
Yeah.
hitting marks and saying decent jokes.
I had no idea what to do next. It wasn't, okay, now let's move forward and find someone to replace him. I really thought we were done, So, I mean, it was a while later that I started thinking initially about Hugh Grant, Is there anyone else who can play the decadent character with elegance and charm like Charlie? And we'd met with you and talked about it. But ultimately, he decided it wasn't right for him, and I truly didn't think there was any other path to go. And I thought, okay, that's the end of the show. And Moonves, Les Moonves called me and said, you really need to meet with Ashton. And I said, I think Ashton's too young for the part. He's a terrific actor, but he's 33, and John's in his mid-40s, and he's just meet with him, And when you meet with Ashton, you quickly get it. Ashton's a remarkable human being as well as a very crafty actor.
And when you left Grey's Anatomy, there was so much conversation around your departure because you had allegedly made a homophobic comment about your former co-star, T.R. Knight, and eventually you did apologize for that. I'm sure you did your own soul searching through all of that.
No. There's no soul searching and no apology to TR Knight. What I apologize for, and I will continue to apologize for if you're going to be accused of something, you don't go in the Golden Globes and use the very word that you've been accused of using. That was a huge mistake.
No, I did not call TR a f***. It never happened. Never happened.
That's what the apology was for, to apologize to all my friends and supporters in the gay community for that misstep. And there is no way I could do something so horrible to another human being then or now.
I think the best statement is just that things were created in a very odd way by the press that were not necessarily completely reported as true.
Muslim Brotherhood, Planet of the Apes, you're talking about Valerie Jarrett.
Yeah.
And
you know, I made a mistake, obviously. It cost me everything, my life's work, everything. I made a mistake, and I've paid the price for it. The first thing was shock that they were saying it was racial when it's political. I didn't know she was African American. And I was so sad that people thought it was racist. I'm so sorry that you thought I was racist and that you thought that my tweet was racist, because it wasn't. It was political. And I'm sorry for the misunderstanding that caused my ill-worded tweet. I never meant to hurt anybody or say anything negative about an entire race of people, which I think 30 years of my work can attest to.
Because I know Roseanne Barr when there are no cameras rolling, when no one's listening, and we've had the conversations we've had, I couldn't sit back and let my friend be thrown under the bus and say, oh, well, sis, it's hot right now. See, what people don't know when you call this woman a racist, that was the woman that was fighting for the black promoter. That was the woman that went to the agency and said, how come there's no black promoters taking me out?
I tell more jokes about myself than I do anybody else, because to me, comedy is very personal. That's what makes it funny. That's what made people like the Roseanne Show, because they saw themselves in, or had an aunt, or you know, their mom or their sister, somebody in their family was, you know, a loud, outspoken woman who loved her family. And that was what I was so excited about to come back to television, was to show that that family is also multiracial and lives next door to Muslims whose ideas they don't agree with. That was what I brought to television and what kicked everybody's ass in the ratings, and they should be so lucky that they'll ever get anywhere near that. And they can't take that away from me no matter what's happened.
So in 1972, I think, we started The Lords of Flatbush. In the audition was Richard Gere and Susie Blakely. Richard was set to play the part I eventually played. And the audition was an improv. The improv was Susie and Richard were boyfriend-girlfriend. They were mad at each other. They'd had a fight, and I was his best friend, the part that eventually Henry Winkler played. And I was supposed to get them back together in the improv. And I knew Richard from acting classes, and he always does this sullen, quiet, somber thing and doesn't say much. And that was his characterization. And he does it beautifully. He's a wonderful actor, but that was what he was doing. So I kept trying to get them to talk to each other. And Richard didn't say anything, you know, and Susie Blakely is the most beautiful woman on the planet. And after a little while, I got bored trying to get him to talk to her. I thought, you're crazy, man. So I started talking to her, and we were having a great time, talking. Richard's sitting sullenly off to the side. This is the audition, right? So the next day they called me up and they said, we fired Gere. And we want you to play the part because we don't want Chico to be somebody that could be moved in on, and you moved in on him.
The word on Twilight was, like, you took it so seriously when you got that part that you almost got kicked off that set because you were being a pain in the ass about the character, right? I mean, you got on set and you made a lot of, not demands, but a lot of thoughts about how the character should be.
I always just kind of thought at the time, it's like 21, that if you're going into a relationship with someone, the way to make it really intense is if, like, you can barely talk to each other, you can barely touch each other, and it's incredibly serious all the time. I mean, it's kind of like what teenage relationships are like, and that's what sort of makes it feel like that. But everyone kind of wanted it to be like, no, they should just be like happy and having fun. That's what people want. I remember the producers giving me a copy of the book, and like every single instance where my character smiled and stuff, they'd highlighted everything.
So you put your foot down. You said, "Hey, listen, man, I don't see the character that way. I'm not
Yeah,
going to be smiling."
I got the same, but I got a different color highlighter and highlighted all the time when he frowns and kind of like things like that. I thought I was pretty safe,
Right.
And they flew up and they're like, "Yeah, you have to do the opposite of what you're doing now, or you're going to get fired today."
So how did you hold your ground? I mean, how did you know what to do?
I didn't. I literally came back after lunch. I was like, "Hi."
I'm a smiling vampire.
Literally, 100%.
I realized what Saturday Night Live did for me, and
But the fire, let's not downplay it.
but
The firing
at the time, at the time, I was hurt because I didn't know what else I was going to do, and I know it wasn't Lauren's decision. The NBC head dude, I know he didn't like our gang. This is how I got fired. My manager, Sandy, he was talking to me. And I said, yeah, next year on the show, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, maybe you don't go back next year. And I was like, I don't know, man. I still got a few more things. He's like, yeah, but you did it already. And I was like, I did it, but,
He didn't want you to know you were fired.
Yeah, it was one
to
of
make
those.
it seem like you were quit.
Yeah.
Oh, my
And
God.
I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. He's like, I think you thought about it.